This is Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. This week at Seattle's Federal Building downtown, hundreds of kids are showing up to court. They've been summoned to appear for immigration hearings. On Tuesday, more than 100 juveniles appeared before a single judge. By the end of the proceeding, many received removal orders, a big step on the path to deportation. Since late June, adults and families have also been packed into immigration hearings much larger than normal, some scheduled on short notice. These have been dubbed mega master hearings. Nina Shapiro at the Seattle Times reported on this new approach by the Trump administration and how it's impacting local immigrants. Nina, thank you so much for being back on Soundside. Good to hear your voice.
Thanks for having me on.
So this all begins with something that's pretty normal and kind of banal, honestly, in the court system, these master calendar hearings. Can you
Right.
tell us what is a master calendar hearing and how are these mega hearings different?
Yeah, so they're similar to an arraignment in criminal court. It's the first interaction with the court system, although they can have several of these preliminary hearings. And they come, and the intent is to get the deportation hearing underway. They eventually will either admit or deny to the government's charges of being deportable. Often, folks do not have a lawyer, and so the judge will often give them another hearing date so that they can have time to find a lawyer. So sometimes these hearings take only a few minutes. But the really important thing to know about these hearings is that if you miss one, you can be ordered removed. It's called an in absentia removal order, and it's just basically a removal order because you didn't show up.
And so there is an ICE prosecutor there, somebody arguing on the behalf of the government, and there is the immigrant showing up to hearing, and sometimes they have an attorney, as you say, and if somebody doesn't show up, that likely means the judge will say, okay, in absentia, they have a deportation order now, a removal order, I should say.
Right.
So what is going on here with these mega hearings? You're reporting on, more than 100 people being involved in a single hearing. That's a remarkable departure from what's been, the normal procedure, right?
Yeah, so this is two, three, four, five times as large as the number of people who will typically come for a hearing. They've been lasting all day. Um, and the administration has suggested that they're making changes to speed up these cases and to reduce the backlog. And it is true, there's a tremendous backlog in immigration court, and these cases can take years. But what immigrant advocates are suspecting is also that the administration is trying to accumulate as many removal orders as possible, especially since some of these hearings are being scheduled or rescheduled at very short notice. Um, the notice, which is typically mailed, well, which is always mailed, won't necessarily get to the person. They may have moved. They may have to make arrangements to come to the court. You have to remember that these hearings in Seattle are for people all over the state and sometimes for out of state. So they may have to travel a long way. They may have to stay in a hotel the night before. So it's quite possible that a lot of these people will get removal orders. And in fact, that has been what's happening.
So, especially for these kids, there is another change that the immigration advocates that you spoke to noticed, and that's that the reason for the hearings, it's no longer just, okay, this is, to check in on your immigration status. There's a welfare check component that was mentioned by the judge in this case. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, this came up at the hearing yesterday, and I was really surprised to hear it. First of all, one stepmom of one of the kids that was there uh, was saying, our hearing date had been moved up a lot. It was scheduled for next year. We got a couple weeks notice that it was happening yesterday, and the judge said, well, we move them up to make sure these kids are okay, to check on their well-being, which is interesting. It's not something I had heard before. And then there were a couple of cases involving kids that were not living with their parents typically, where the judge said she wants to see them 3 times a year. And she referred to them at one point as welfare checks to make sure these kids were okay and to ensure their safety. Again, not something I've heard about before. So I asked, the head of a unaccompanied juvenile program about this. Had she ever heard it before? She'd never heard this logic before. So of course, if a kid is expected to come 3 times a year, those are more occasions that they might not meet, and therefore, they might get removal orders if they fail to make one.
There's an interesting tension here because, as you say, there is undoubtedly a backlog in immigration court cases. And the idea of speeding that up, sounds like a good thing. But when the speed up involves rescheduling these hearings, making them more onerous, for example, having a kid have to appear 3 times a year, the advocates that you talk to are suggesting this isn't just about speeding things up. This is also about ending up with more removal orders at the end of the day. You mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know. I actually, broke the news to this immigration lawyer. I was like, "Have you ever heard of this?" No, I've never heard of this. So I think they're kind of puzzling over it and trying to understand what it's really about. There are suspicions there that it's because of removal orders, and we have seen something like this before. So um, ICE had started checking on minors who were living out in the community and calling them welfare checks um, earlier in the year, and I think last year. And there was fear that this was really about, keeping tabs on them so that they could be deported. So, we don't have all the answers to these questions. This is something that's really new. And as one lawyer was telling me, everything is just changing so fast.
Mm. Is this a situation where all the immigrants who show up to a hearing can be guaranteed due process? I mean, when you talk about a mass scale hearing with more than 100 people appearing before the same judge, is it legal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be legal. People are coming again for these very quick hearings. There's really not that much to them. I think one of the things that was different that I noticed yesterday, as I said, if they come without a lawyer, which most people do come without a lawyer, and remember, there's no right to representation in these courts, which are not criminal courts. They're administrative courts under the Department of Justice. If they come without a lawyer, typically, if it's the first time they appear before the judge, they're given more time and they're rescheduled for a later hearing. Usually, that hearing is a fair ways out, like let's say 6 months or a year. But I noticed yesterday she was scheduling these hearings for kids about a month out. So that's a much shorter time frame. And the lawyers that I talked to were saying, it's very difficult to find a lawyer right now, period, an immigration lawyer because of the huge demand. So that's not a lot of time to find a lawyer. Now, if they were coming for a second or third hearing and they had already said that they were going to try and find a lawyer and hadn't found a lawyer yet, the judge, kind of signaled she was running out of patience with that. And she noted, you've been in the country for 2 years in some cases, you've had time to find a lawyer. I'm giving you until this amount of time. Um, or in some cases, I think in one case she just went ahead and said, okay, we're going to do this now. And by doing it now, it means doing that initial pleading. Again, it's not the final determination for whether these people are deported or not, but there's an initial pleading, and then folks are considered for the more substantive part of the deportation proceedings, which is whether they qualify for asylum or any other kind of relief.
You reported that at the first of these mega master hearings held in Seattle for adults in June, that volunteers estimated that around 2/3 of the 56 people who were scheduled didn't show up. Is that normal for such a large number of people to not show up to a hearing like this?
Yeah, that's a pretty high number. This was for the morning part of the hearing. And I talked to um, kind of an expert who's been analyzing court data using publicly accessible data. And one thing that he noticed for the people that were scheduled that morning was that about a couple of dozen of them had been scheduled for a hearing on a different day. So this is an example of kind of the short notice, or in some cases, people didn't get notice. Like a couple people I talked to said that they never got notices in the mail, and the way that they found out was by checking the online portal that the court system maintained about their court date. So information isn't always getting to people about when their hearing is, especially if it's been rescheduled.
And Nina, how common are these mega hearings now? Like, is this the new normal?
That's something we don't know at this point. So there have been two so far for adults and families, and there was an expectation that they might be happening about once a week, TBD. And then for kids, we know that, or we expect that to happen every day this week, beginning Tuesday. And after that, I'm not sure.
This is obviously not the only change that the Trump administration has made to the way immigration enforcement works in this country. We've been reporting on it now for a long time. One that stands out to me that has relevance for this story, though, Nina, is that the Department of Justice recently announced the swearing in of 39 new immigration judges and 6 temporary immigration judges last month. 77 new immigration judges were sworn in May. This is an attempt to speed up, again, proceedings, get more people on the bench who can hear these cases. But the Trump administration has also fired more judges than previous administrations, nearly 100 fired in 2025. And I wonder, just with all of this turmoil and all of these changes, when you interact with the people who work in these courts, whether it's the judges, their staff, the attorneys who handle these cases, what has all of this been like for them?
Yeah, you have to remember that the judges and ICE prosecutors are not talking to me. So I wish they were. But I
They
get
don't love talking to newspaper reporters.
I don't know why. But I mean, I get the sense that at times it can be overwhelming. And you saw that at last week's hearing that I went to, which was the second master calendar hearing. So the judge was, visibly, kind of getting tired at the end. He and a court official were talking, and, he said, "I'm surprised my voice didn't give out. I can't believe we got through it all." So there's definitely a recognition that these are a lot of people they're being expected to handle.
In your first story for the mega hearings, one thing stood out to me, and that is that you highlighted one person who showed up for a hearing. Her name is Santos Mendoza, and she had previously been represented by the local immigration attorney Alexander Lozano, who operated a really big operation, attorneys in cities in other parts of the country as well, headquartered here locally. Lozano has since given up her law license after allegations of misconduct by the state bar. You reported on that case about Lozano and the collapse of her legal office. And just finding a client like this, Santos Mendoza, at this mega hearing, what was it like to kind of talk to Santos about what she's going through right now? Again, having had a lawyer, the office just closed. Now she's doing what? I mean, what is her situation?
She's a little lost, actually. I mean, she's there, she's holding a folder with Lozano's big picture all over it, because her personality was very much a part of her branding. She called herself the Attorney of Miracles. Um, and she was angry because she had paid thousands of dollars to Lozano's firm. I think she said that she was, paying off like a $21,000 fee to be represented.
Oh my God.
Um, and um, and part of that was that they were supposed to appear with her in court, but no one was there. She had been calling the office, and no one was answering the phone. So these people are pretty much left high and dry, and there's been a huge scramble among immigration lawyers locally to try and help them. But the scale is just amazing. I mean, there are thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people nationwide who are now left without a lawyer.
Yeah. And it just seemed like a microcosm of the challenges faced by people attempting to navigate this system right now, Nina. I don't know if you have any final thoughts on that and what you saw at these mega hearings over the past couple of weeks.
Well, it is a very complex system. It's hard for anybody to make sense of, even if you know the language. I mean, I have to say, like, lawyers who are not in the immigration system, they don't understand how it works. It's really complicated. And so, one of the things that struck me yesterday was at the hearing is the kids that were there, they were so young. You think of these unaccompanied kids coming over, you think of them mostly as being teens, or I did, but there were like 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. They had bows in their hair. They were covering, they were bringing backpacks. They were sleeping on their relatives' laps because they had to get up so early to go to court. They were holding the hands of the adults who brought them. I mean, it's just a very complicated process, and obviously they're not going to be navigating it on their own. They're going to be trying to find people who help them, or there are people who help them, but it's pretty intimidating.
Nina Shapiro is a reporter for the Seattle Times covering immigration and other issues. Nina, I really appreciate your time in reporting on this. I think it's just kind of a remarkable new chapter in what local immigrants and advocates are navigating right now. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.